Right, and we're live. Hey, what's up, guys? James here. Again with some Witch on the Holy Night. It's a old visual novel that's been re-released. That goes by the name of Mahotsukai no Yoru, if you guys don't know. But I literally just started the game, and this is the opening screen. It's crazy. I don't remember playing this. I remember I did play Oyo. That's the nickname for it. Quite a while back, probably 10 years back now or something. Maybe longer. I can't remember exactly, but I never finished it because at the time it wasn't fully translated. So I've mostly forgotten about it. I only really remember like a little bit of flashbacks here and there, and of what characters have cameoed in Background Order. So I barely know anything about it. But yeah, I didn't even realize that this is what the start of the start of this game is. I literally just built it up, and this is it. It's a traditional visual novel, as far as I remember. So it's gonna be a lot of reading. Anyways, let's get right into it. There's no music, so it's a little bit awkward. Okay. It was a winter's day 8 years ago. That solemn morning when she understood the value of life for the very first time. So we're probably gonna need to adjust audio as well, as we go on. Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure white water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories both frustrating and halcyon. It was only during summer though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. The father would drive her to the train station, after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the iced over windows to clear.
キーを回してきてくれるかい?
The father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath until she reached the old sedan. As always, she inserted the key, then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she'd done so many times before. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. The father came out and opened the hood of the car, creaking fan belts. A monstrous-looking engine. There was a cat inside the engine. Something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts, and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather, a chunk of meat that had been its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster.
かわいそうに.
Father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine, and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of.
いいんだ。が悪いんじゃないんだよ。
Yeah, man. I totally forgot about this. Father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's grey fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I could see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest.
待ちなさい
She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician that could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help.
その子猫の運命を変えろという
Cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. Kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task, a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish, like a machine. Girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Man, I'd forgotten how surreal Type Moon VNs were. Holy shit. Regret spread through her chest like an endless grey sky.
トローだったな結局元に戻すとは
Mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return.
そこに誰かいるの
Day. It's her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed. Whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Well then. Again, greedy and only able to destroy. I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Chapter 1, Strange One. I didn't realize it was split into chapters. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor grey. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit. What's that in Celsius? Rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. Still waiting for the movie adaptation. When is that coming out? Or is it has it even been announced? I don't know. But lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On any ordinary weekday, tiredness would be unavoidable. But today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. They announced a while ago, but you know, Demon Slayer's a thing. Yeah, that's alright, yeah. The movie just came out like a couple of months ago or something. Outside the window was a gloomy grey, a reminder more of evening than morning. Wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination. But having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was no concern to her. She shut the curtains. She closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Restful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, her eyes popped open out of habit.
こんな日に限って。
Telephone was situated in the foyer of the first floor. Entering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs.
アメリカや。
Hey Mousy Mouse, what's up? How you doing? In a sleep-deprived state, that distance seems somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. Phone's incessant ringing continued. AMVNs. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of reading. Upside, I don't really need to farm. Probably. Hopefully. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
アリス出ないの？
She thought her housemaid would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. Realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school, and was likely in class at a prestigious little hilltop academy. Caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
ああ、もうせっかくの安眠を。
She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room.
寒。
She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. What do you mean? Refarming for all the endings at 100% CG? Get to that point, we'll just skip red text. That's what we do. I ain't gonna read it again. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least. Which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, and one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. Knowing that it's a Type Moon VN, we're probably gonna have a lot of dead endings. So we're probably gonna have to rewind quite a bit, because I'm just probably gonna fail endings. Hey, Vestilin. Yeah, we're playing Mahoyo, man. Finally. I realize it's been like a year since it came out, almost. That's crazy, right? The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. 2 years plus, man. No, yeah, it's longer. Oh, shit. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、幽霊屋敷そのものだけど、だいたい2人で住むには広すぎるのよ、この。
Counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands, or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale, for whether it be objectively true or merely supposition. It is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that the extraordinary events are set into motion. Two years, man. That's crazy. This game's been on my to play list for that long. Shit. Game deceit. Oh man. What the fuck? Oh, the opening scene. Capture card decided to cut randomly for no reason. It's okay, we didn't miss too much. I assume you already played it at this point, though, right? Yeah, I originally played Mario like 10 years ago now. Some crazy amount of time ago. I can't remember exactly, but I never finished it because it wasn't completely translated at the time. I remember I was enjoying it though. It's quite good. It's like red. Everyone else is just like kind of a, you know, more of a subdued color. Like Fuyuki. Where? I don't recognize it. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen the CGs. Do I? There we go. That's weird. Right. The rain has subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by the early afternoon.
と言っても、私には関係のない話だけど。
Weather reflected a luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. She didn't encounter any other students along the way. Nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk to the faculty room simply read, faculty closed. The school had given all of its students a day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were none less neatly pressed. Slim framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image this mid-20s man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. Mid-20s, damn, great. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Yamashiro sensei.
Where's the H? She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
やあ、おはよう、青崎くん。要件は聞いているかな？
はい。1時間前に自宅で、事前に何の相談もなく。
Graduated from his high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about, and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness of him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere, like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure, not a buddy to joke and pal around with. It was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. So natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk.
はあ、今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではありませんから。
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial.
そうならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
Smoking indoors?
転入生の紹介をするとだけです。理由も脈絡もない説明でした。
Some old culture shit. One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. You could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか。
いや、ごめんごめん、謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。ちょっと君の手を借りたくてね。
本当に転入生の問題で？
うん、訳ありというか難しいというか。彼宗十郎くんというんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
He threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems, or was difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
He had her doubts that swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
何？あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。 裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ。青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason the teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her over this past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Should by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
それはね、別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
She did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。
Okay. These weird ass pauses sometimes.
なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
It's because I'm using a controller. I'm gonna just use a mouse instead. Honestly. He knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
うわ、怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。トマ、納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もう随分待たせてしまっているからね。それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied, before turning and walking out of the faculty room. They'd been waiting for about an hour. He did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. It was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. New game with this? It's a visual novel, called Witch and the Holy Night, by the Japanese name is Mahotsukai no Yoru. So, not much action this time. It's just going to be a reading. Not much action from me. Fingers crossed that Nasa didn't write another teacher that will be a bad guy down the line. We'll see about that. I don't remember, honestly, so... Like, any character at any time. Honestly. It was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now. The boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. It also means a lot of reading from me. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked soaked in the rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. Then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and the thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. Quietly endured the numbing cold, and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, it was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out in the moment. He, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on her way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
なんて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
That is. He had every right to be angry. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villagers in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan Rail, the old national railways, now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. It's a village boy. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって、村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし。電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
He shot a sidelong glare this way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivety of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから、電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど。そいつ、学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど、実際来るのは今日が初めてらしい。それで緊張していたのかな。 あまり会話も弾まなかった。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや、探検隊の話だね。
I understand why she'd be pretty mad. I literally just dumped this on her. It's like, you deal with it. What?
怖いな、青崎くん。冗談だって。そう睨まないでくれ。大丈夫。話してみた感じ、おとなしい子だったから。なんていうか、言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
She gave her a blunt reply. She tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like. But the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to a warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
Oh, really? You're trying to smile. I guess you're not very good at it. Like, Rich, what do you think? Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ、愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off without sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought this person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. Yamashiro was about to get arse chained if he continued. Might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least. They could have used their brains and organized this in a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
Drowning headache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities. Just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room. And found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little. You don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are an unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former. She'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter. A bitter thorn that made him homesick. Though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the grey sky. He had already waited a whole hour, I figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でもそろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろ
Been vaguely keeping track of time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the pattern of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then. He heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
う。よかった。忘れられているかと思った。
He could hear two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。随分とお待たせしちゃって。
The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought him here.
ってあれ、里中先生いないんですか？ひどいなあ。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, the tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there. A dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This was how it felt when time stood still. He blinked quickly a few times, as if taken aback. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes widened slightly, as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feeling into words was a different matter altogether, so we will never know exactly what he experienced at that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed it had been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くん。
H's!
で、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she just simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. This was the setting the three of them found themselves in. Something I'm realizing is that the narration is from a third person compared to Archery, where it's mostly first person narration at MC's thoughts. Yeah. So it's mostly third person, but sometimes it seems to be from Sojiro's perspective as well. It's a bit... Still trying to figure it out. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, his overall air felt placid, tame even. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least, he was passive. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him as more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Alco's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, the guests here. He felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Alco felt herself raising her natural defenses.
信じられない。私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
She hated not understanding things, her emotions in particular. It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her. It still nagged her like a thorn in her side.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶？
After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Luko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, might have looked like a stare down. Yet, in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled towards the innocent boy and skewered him.
Yeah, 待たせたね、しずきくん。
Hearing his name, Sojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his mind. Chalking up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out in a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. These were merciless. Her stare an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure, despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, or supposed mistakenly that this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It's a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. While he had thought he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out, she was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment that he realized his failure. I'm sorry, this... It's not as... I'm just thinking of the meme. It was at this moment he fucked up. Let's continue. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would becoming a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the school teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
ああ、
え
いけてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。それじゃあ、僕はこの辺でいいかな。
Trying to escape! Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept towards the door.
僕は職員室にいるから、終わったら来るように。いいかい、青崎くん。なんていうか、生徒会長としての度量の広さを、この際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained of the room was an artless boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over the first moves, but there was only Alco who was reading so much into the situation. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojuro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし。それで、あなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself.
ああ、静木宗十郎かな。君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response.
さんはいいわ。柄じゃないから。こっちは静木くんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くんづけでいいかって聞いてるの。何よ。おかしなこと言った？私。
いや、すごく。
The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, quickly second-guessed himself.
いや、いいんだ。ごく一般的なんだろう。静木くんで頼む。君は青崎でいいんだよな。
え、よろしく。
He followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of a task at hand, it had been entrusted to her. It was her personal policy to see it through to the end.
悪いけど、優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし、手早く行くわよ。
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
It was blunt and cold was lost on him once again. Can I see the? Yeah, here we go. There is a log. Okay, cool. So technically, the translation here. Let's read here again.
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
He doesn't specifically say your time is valuable. Your time is valuable. He just says, time is valuable. Yeah, like.
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yappari. Yeah, time really is valuable, I guess. So it's not specifying her specifically. But anyway. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Alco did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway or any sign of life. It was more like a prison than a cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Alco that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解してる？
ああ、学校の仕組みについては分かった。この建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんてちょっと想像できないけど。
そう、よかったわね。
Alco rubbed her forehead. This soldier kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently all he'd heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Alco imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro managed to pass the transfer exam after all, barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Alco grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time. Or at least she'd try to keep it that way.
青崎、
He asked, calmly trying to get her attention.
何？
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな。
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが、君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見える。やはり今朝は悪いものでも。
His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her if she had remembered to eat breakfast. It's like another hammer to her head. It's true that Alco had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but in the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわ。もう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね。
he'd been warned that her emotions were so naked in her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be that he could not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃなさそうよね。
She found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Alco, far too late, that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
いいわ。言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど、あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。いちいち声に出すのも会話にするのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together.
なるほど。どうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが、確かにそっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kinds of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Still, Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond naivety. Stranger in the strange land he may be, but was only civilized to forgive him some jet lag-induced confusion. Okay.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に行くから。
He had regained her composure. Sojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks.
あと一つ。
Alco waited for Sojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her head with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒ってるんだ？怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか
Is it in your line of business or is it running your family? It doesn't know he's rage reading. Oh yeah, he doesn't know, man. This guy's a village boy. A long silence. She knew it wouldn't change the situation. She remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって頭を抱えただけよ。
With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Sojiro Shizuki. While what constitutes as normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. It was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. And Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his classroom, to his homeroom, Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time had passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor.
まずいな。
Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned.
あと20分経つと1時だ。
嘘でしょ。うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。日が暮れていないのが不思議なくらいね。
Aoko glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection.
なんだこいつ。ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
The guy before her was nothing like earlier, in contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met. She found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクしたなんて言わないでね。
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして1時になるとまずいんだ。
Sojiro's gaze wandered as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have had a hard time seeing it, as there were no windows in the hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて、自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
いや、褒めても何も出ないぞ。
He took it as praise. He's just hungry.
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
He yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で、
それで一体何の用なの？
Sojiro's face lit up as he finally understood what she was asking him.
そこは秘密にしておきたい。
He said with a perfectly straight face.
慣れ始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポには失神しそうになるわ。
Frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
しずきくん？
She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojiro took a step back. And another. And another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging towards him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ最後の質問にしとくわね。あなた私をからかって楽しい？
Had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence would prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face.
分かった。説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと思ったの？バカね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
知ってる。試験の時に許可はもらってる。
へえ。
Yuko's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet.
しかし許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
一つって、あなた掛け持ちでバイトしてるの？
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わないか？
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの方だと思うけど。
Still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time for oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last things she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate. Which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd be just as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else.
別に私もこのまま帰るから。
First though, she thought it'd be that they both stopped by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。なんというかとても学校ですね。
そうかそうか。うん、明日から頑張りなさい。
He had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いや、待ってるべきじゃない？
そうか。青崎がいいんならいいんだな。
ん？
There it was again. Whatever Soldier was getting at, Aoko had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
He shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile, as if he found the gesture endearing. There was a softer expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile.
それじゃあまた。
And with that friendly farewell, Soldier walked towards the end of the hallway. So she thought before he turned into the next class over. Soldier headed straight for one of the classroom's windows. Barney opened it with these. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In an instant, she realized his intention was opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て！
She already had one leg out of the window where she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは！
何ってアルバイトに行くんだけど。
Can you imagine? This is how he leaves the school every day.
その窓は人が出入りするところじゃないの。だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
You saw the light of understanding dawning in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら危なすぎる。
Ben is just hungry.
危ないのはあんたの頭。
Yes, reading Mahoyo. It's been on my to playlist for ages. I'm finally getting around to it. You know, man, it's peak. Yeah, I did enjoy it when I had read it like ages ago, but I never finished it, and I've like basically forgotten most of it at this point. And salt went right over his head.
あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだった。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
This, I'm sorry. This expression makes him look like no thoughts head empty. He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。ただ、できれば私の前ではやらないでほしいだけよ。それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
はあ、大丈夫なのか？あんなんで。
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in a strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she had just had.
いっか。どうせこれっきりなんだし。
The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The grey sky seemed frozen in time. Shuri Umineko next. I don't think I've ever read any Umineko VNs. I watched the anime like fucking ages ago. Fate. FSN, yeah, I've read FSN. And Holo Ataraxia. I've read both of those. Also have read. It's impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. It was just the first Nasuaka side from FGO. I've read FSN. Face Day Night was my first one, actually. It's my first visual novel. Stop. Actually. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty and remarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock.
時間、合ってる。
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before. But for whatever reason, affected her far more than she wished. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could towards the entrance. and opened a bright red umbrella. No, the anime is shit. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people that the Umineko anime was not good. When I watched it, it was okay. I was like, I watched Higurashi, which is why I watched Umineko, because it's by the same creator. You know, I looked it up afterwards. And I liked the Higurashi anime. And I had into picking up the VNs for reading. At the time, the Higurashi VNs were the old version with questionable art, I guess. not in a lewd sense. Just in a it's not very good. So I was like, I can't enjoy this. It might be something I want to go back to. I don't know. It's been a while. I haven't watched the latest season of the newest season of Higurashi, which is basically like a reboot almost. Apparently that ruined things. Okay, got it. So napkin drawings. You should look it up, man. It's really bad. She walked as quietly as she could towards the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it will probably cease completely in an hour or so. As a fellow Uta fan, I think you'll enjoy Umineko a lot. Probably would, yeah. Alright. Well, I'll think about it, if I remember. I've got a lot of games on my plate still. I want to play the new VN by E that's coming out soon. What's it called? I don't remember what it's called. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of her bright colors, so Ako's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Alco instead of a ghost. Yeah, don't watch the new Higurashi. OG one's a pretty good adaptation though. Yeah, the OG ones were great. I quite liked it. I basically marathoned the season 1 and 2 in one night. It was at nighttime. Like yeah, that's a series to marathon at night, right? It was with that umbrella that she made her way towards Misaki Station. Misaki Private High School took its namesake for the town it was in. Can you describe what VN is? Well, I probably know the name. The key one? I can't remember what the name is called, but it's not released yet. Key visual. Let me search it up. This area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. That one, that's it. Anyway, yeah. It's not out yet. I don't think it is. Started selling some goods on Ami already, which I was like, I know I'm gonna like this, so I'm just gonna buy the goods ahead of time. There was some report to preserve Misaki's national treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
With those words, Sumaya snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for new urban development. funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in nearly 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of the neighboring Yashirogi. Why did they get the H right here? Where else? Ah! Well, they only get some Misaki Hills.
それも当然よね。どういじくっても、もともとが山中の宿場町だし、山ごと切り崩すって言うんなら別だけど。
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The game is a better rage baiter than Sojuro. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. Now, chances are it's probably multiple translators working on the same project. That's usually what it is, right? And some people will translate it right, and some people will translate it without the H. It became a truly odd suburban town, becoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school, established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was not only steep and remote, it had become an overgrown game trail with the passage of time. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. A department store chain, damn, okay. And thus Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hearty, rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. She had wanted to, after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days touring her favorite bands on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company on what should have been a day off.
思い返してみると、私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
Frustration evaporated into the cold December air.
でもま、いっか。退屈だけはしないわけだし。
Those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in a wake. The busier part of the town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Yeah, there's 2 upcoming key VNs. Pretty excited for them. What was the other one? I know they released Looper. I haven't read it yet. That's more of a kinetic novel. I haven't really read kinetic novels from Key, actually. I should read it, I just haven't gotten around to it. Misaki's train station was brand new. It's looking no prettier than an abandoned factory. It had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with the modern feel. But in time the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe. But she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. She looked back and blinked. For just a moment she could have sworn she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. Must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left was the sound of the town. He sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with that feeling that still lingered.
夏場の方ってもう少しこう
Grumbled under her breath.
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Fortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. One last battle remained. Dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか？
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだからもう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか？無事帰ってきたら晩飯おごってやっから。
Bright orange co-worker just clasped his hand together, as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled in with this unreasonable task. Box, Chinese ingredients, Chinese sounding OST. Making mapo tofu. Is Kirei gonna show up? Ten years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. Everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiroi Nuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town. A pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill. To an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. It had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. The upcoming keyword is Kosai Toshi. I haven't heard of that. That town. So I'll probably want to play that too. There's no you, okay. Hiroi Nezuko, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of the town, was no exception to that convention. It had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground in development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Oko Aozaki traversed the long slope. Been reading Kara no Shoujo final episode, it's pretty amazing so far. Kara no Shoujo, is that the one with like all the disabled girls? Is that it? I think. It's like an old BN. No, it's a different one. Okay. Alright. I haven't read this. I heard of it. She could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. View was one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today, she had been denied even that. The murder mystery began.
雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
I don't know too much about it. I've only heard the name, yeah, but seems like it would be interesting. Akko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now. The journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a wary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open, as if to welcome her home. There sits atop the hill on a haunted house. It is how the story much shared around the town used to begin. But fresh rumors around the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. It's pretty old, but they released official English localization on Steam pretty recently, like last year, I think. Oh, that's why I only heard of it, but I never played it. Okay. Should look into it. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to the town. This particular piece of slander was the one Alko wished to discredit the most. Did you guys hear about the Steins Gate remake that's coming out? I kind of want to play that. It seems like they've remade like animations and stuff and graphics. And there's going to be a new story as well? It seems like? I don't know, it seems interesting. I want to play it. It's been ages since I played Steins Gate. The final rumor was an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. It spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood on top of a hill, no one dared to approach. Like a ruin, shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. I vaguely saw something on Twitter a few weeks ago. Yet Sakura no Uta. It's getting English Fantiel. I don't know that one. That's the first time I've heard of that one. The house. It's the Kuonji mansion. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. It was an unabashedly haunted house where Alko Aozaki resided, for reasons known only to her. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. I remember seeing that a few months ago. The Kuonji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. Western-style mansion in Japan. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms, and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence, covered in thorny vines. It was also annexed to the main building. Yeah, they released a video trailer of Steins Gate like a while ago. I saw it on YouTube and I was like, oh, okay, let's just give it a watch randomly. And okay, they changed quite a bit. Given such extravagance, there was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodges, It was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here.
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. There was a grand double door that would have paired well with the brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of grey. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen to not to include any lights in the entrance area. But why? The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. Oh, there's a skylight, right? You should still have lights though, like for nighttime. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest. But knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. Stairs curled up to the wall to the second floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. Alright. I'll see you later, Ryu. Thanks for coming by. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here though. The Kuonji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but the 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world, or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Ako's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room, for no other reason other than that she thought it would be easy to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, a beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That was the extent of what she had brought from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She had also borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ。アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year, and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. There was not a room for the person she had been. There was a room for the person she would eventually become. A place of solitude that only she could enter. Or so she thought.
うわ、壊れてるどころか、跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ。笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
The neighbor that intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort, as was not afraid to fail. Could have also almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the 1st floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing, into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby hallway. Door.
元気のない生活か。想像したくないな。
It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Alco it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. Huge CRT TV, yep, we ain't in 2000.
あ
This could be like early 2000s. Still have CRTs back then. The flop, she sank into the sofa. Took a sip of her tea, then another. Definitely not 2010s. It'll be like 2005, maybe. Somewhere around there. Maybe older. I don't remember when the game was first created, actually. By the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, as she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Oh, hello. Alco blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup. But the tea within had gone completely cold.
寝てた。
She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table.
ええ、
The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Alco, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but actually her school uniform. In Alco's humble opinion, gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her gently arched neck was so lovely that even Alco found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kuonji, and she was the same age as Alco.
私、どれくらい寝てた？
1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
Alice answered indifferently. Not that it bothered Alco, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little that night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに。せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
Alco drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Kuonji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。 おかえり、アリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。
I know it's quite blasphemous to tea enjoyers, but I actually like cold tea.
今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど、お参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Oko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Oko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Oko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Oko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて一日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
うん。
This was very much on point today. It was true that despite outward appearances, Alko was seething with frustration. That aside,
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name. Alko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Alko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。そいつ、教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ、あの程度の冗談は。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。まあ一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. To be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of his head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
三問異解はいい言葉ね。
From her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Alko gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作、スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡は あなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Alco seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Alco sighed and laid back on the sofa. Soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど、
Shot a glance at Alco. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Alco had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that was not the kind of person Alco Awazaki was.
いいわよ。何？
He asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
Coldness in her voice made Alco gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called a hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet that careless mistake was a clear sign of Alco's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure for the last year and a half. But she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Alco pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
オッケー、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Alco could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Alco grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Alco decided to tune into a variety show that already started. Alice started to speak but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off at the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Alco that the ah sound her cute little roommate made just now was different than the wah she blurted in times past.
何？
Alco turned down the volume of the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited more perfectly.
今日、 帰ってくる時おかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど
Alco nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない本当に意味のないことよけどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない青子人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる
For a second, Alco thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. Well, I think that about anyone really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Alco, the story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Alco concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの私もからくりぐらいは思いつくからただ理由がわからないから聞いてるのわざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね私は
Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ世の中いろいろあるから私たちみたいなのもいれば下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに
I wanna bet that was Sojiro. It probably was.
で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Alco loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. There are no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was a system that worked best for them. So they're going to order takeout from the place where Sojiro works. He's going to show up in his cat uniform. That's what's going to happen. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply like ordering out. It's like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
Hungry student council president laid out a stack of takeout menus, like she might fan a deck of cards, and silently scanned for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance.
悪いけど私夕飯済んでるの
With those words, Alco froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it wouldn't be bothered to deliver to the princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Alco and Alice are still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね帰宅部学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ
Fortunately for Alco, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああひどい女そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない
It's unknown how serious Alco was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. Damn, she had nothing at school too? Oh, okay. It's a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanted to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話
Pretty hard for showering Sojuro's living situation. Yeah, I know, right? She had sushi and brought back konbini food, okay. Alco had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Alco had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store food. Things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up around town. Popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
She went back to her room without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she didn't confirm it made Alco anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
Oh, but this means they're not gonna order takeaway though. Okay. She stood up announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. Sushi? She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Alco.
聞きたい。
まあ、なんとなく。
Alco nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Wait, it's Sojiro again. Save. Happening of last night. Chapter 2. Or episode 2.
都会は魔界だ。けど、慣れれば割と住みやすいとは思う。
Sojiro sighed listlessly. He looked down at the winter schoolyard below, lost in thought. December was written on the corner of the chalkboard. Could not believe 10 days had already passed since he transferred to the school. The last vestiges of autumn had faded with the changes of the month. Trees were all but barren, and the ground below them a mat of fallen leaves. Fourth period was classics. The elderly teacher stood at the lectern and rambled on. While he had finally gotten used to the classroom, it still had a long way to go to the top, to get up to speed with his classes. Lacking even the basic understanding of most students learned in early scholastic life, it was a battle for Sojiro to keep up. Even if he was unable to grasp all the content right away, he at least tried to memorize everything in the hope that he could make use of it down the road. Which is why losing himself in his thoughts was about the last thing he should have been doing. Normally chastised himself for daydreaming, but troublingly, he was unable to concentrate in class today. Sojiro could not place the source of his lack of concentration. It could not have been the winter in the city. It was much milder than in the mountains. Neither was his part-time job particularly tiring. He was not any more physically fatigued than the average student, so that could not be it either. Others might conclude that it was because the courses were boring, but that seemed off the mark too. Sojiro did not share his classmates' opinion about their classes. On the contrary, he rather enjoyed this class time. His frame of mind was not to blame either. Trying to figure out what was wrong only made him more depressed.
いけない。こんなんじゃ気が散る一方だ。
Scolded himself and turned his attention to the chalkboard. The rhythmic ticks of the chalk were sending him into a slumber, but he somehow managed to resist their lullaby. And yet he was still unable to focus on the class. Sojiro reflected silently, as was his custom, and sighed inwardly. Deep down he knew the real source of his agitation. The events of the previous night were the only thing it could be. He chimed to signal the end of the class. The teacher bowed and exited into the hallway. To see him off, the 30 or so students all stood up from their desks. The clock, which had seemed to slow dramatically around the 11:30, now struck noon. The tension seemed to fade from the room all at once. The release from a difficult lesson was the start of lunchtime, a highlight of school life. Isakiai's cafeteria was not particularly known for its quality of food. Complaints that the quality was below that of a private school were unheeded, and the same unique flavors appeared on the menu each and every day. Private school prices were coupled with subpar quality led to the majority of students to opt for box lunches instead. Sojiro's Class 2C was no exception. The boys muscled as many as 10 desks into what resembled a long dining table. Conversely, the girls divided themselves into smaller tables of 2 or 3 desks with practiced ease, started chatting within their cliques. A single student wasted even a second of their precious lunchtime. Both sides differed in method, they shared a common goal. Sojiro was struck dumb by the efficiency of the transformation. Even after 10 days, he was unable to keep pace with the rest of the class, and remained seated where he had sat during the previous period.
Oi! こっち来いよ、しずき!
Voice came from a large makeshift dining table near the window. Suke Kinomi was beckoning him over, while leaning back in his chair, in a way that looked like he could fall back at any second. He was regularly shut down by others in the class for being lazy and crass. His earnest nature kept him from getting on anyone's bad side. Something could be said for not being so forthcoming all the time too.
飯にしようぜ、飯。俺さ、昨日店の残り物もらいすぎたんだよ。春巻きだよ、春巻き。それを見た親父がさ、もらったもんは残すなってうるさくてさ。
Seemed his end game was to find someone who might take pity on him and trade him for something better. The two of them worked at the same restaurant, so he was one of the few people Sojiro knew before starting school. It was also the reason Sojiro was able to learn the true meaning of the phrase, can't live with them, can't live without them.
お、いいな。しずきも来いよ。今日は待ちに待った缶詰祭りをすっからさ。
ついに結婚するのかよ。誰か冷静になった方がいいんじゃないのか？
バカ、すげえ楽しいってきっと。そりゃパチモン臭いけど、カニ缶とか食い放題なんだぜ。サバ缶じゃなくて。
マジ？やったー！俺も参加する！コンビーフは一人1個？それとも早い者勝ち？
お前な、一人で何個も食えるもんじゃねえぞあれ。うまいのは最初の1個だけだって。
しずきたちが来るならノルマは一人7個に下がるのか。助かるな。
ところで木の実の弁当の中身、なんか缶詰より硬そうじゃね？
Boys usually passed the time by making fun of each other's lunches. Today they were united against a common foe. pyramid of countless cans stood in the middle of the table. They had all been taken from the pantry of a certain mysterious house, and the expiration dates on them had all been scribbled on out with a marker.
よし野郎ども、各自毎缶きりの用意はいいな。食べるも地獄、残すも地獄。我ら5次元目の授業はないものと恐れぬ修羅となり、鉄の悪魔どもを平らげん。食材は下町の何でも紹介、マーケット中山からの提供です。ヒュー、バカも休み休み、イエーイ。
Boys united as one, hoisted their can openers into the air.
ほら、しずきも食べようぜ。缶切りならまだあるからさ。
いや、君らの弁当の毒味はごめんだって昨日言ったはずだ。それにその缶詰半分以上賞味期限切れてるだろ
う。なんだよ、釣れねえな。
An inexplicably excited group of guys. Their real motivation seemed to be to spread the pain. Moved by their energy and conceding defeat, Soldier got up from his seat and joined them. And before he could,
じゃあ私たちが釣り上げようかな。しずきくん、あんなの放っておいて一緒にどう？
another interested party joined the fray. A girl with a short but stylish hair called out to him. She had also tried to get Soldier to join the track and field club several days earlier.
う。いや、そっちも遠慮したいな、できれば。
Still with the troubled look on his face. On their table was nothing but a pile of fruit Soldier had never seen before.
なんで？パパイヤとか嫌い？マンゴーもあるし、ヤシの実だってあるし、内緒だけど夕張メロンもあるんだから。
Members of the fruit group pumped their fists in unison at that last delicacy.
待て、なんだヤシの実って。あれ食えるもんなの？
あ、マンゴー余ったら回してほしいな。
バカ、肉食え肉。そんなんだから貧弱な体してんだぞ、お前。
Soldier couldn't keep track of all the voices flying across the room.
わかるのはどっちも破滅的だってことだけだ。
That being said, he found it difficult to refuse them outright. His tendency to accept others' goodwill at face value occasionally left him frozen with indecision. Not accustomed to regular human interaction, he was unable to judge when it was or was not appropriate to turn someone down. Someone tapped the lost little lamb on his shoulder.
ほっとけほっとけ。いちいちここのバカどもに付き合ってちゃ人生台無しだ。適当に流しとけばいいんだよ。ほら、お前らもな、善良な羊を悪の園に引きずり込んでんじゃねえよ。
An inappropriately loud voice echoed through the classroom from behind him.
副会長。
Soldier turned around to see a boy about a head taller than him. His long hair, while unkempt, had been brushed back, giving it an appealingly wideswept look. His attractive features belied the contempt for the classroom his eyes carried. Unlike the perpetually dopely looking Soldier, he was an extremely attractive boy, capable of captivating anyone who so much as glanced at him. In most cases, such a boy's presence would be met with awe and respect. However,
なんだよ、副会長様のお出ましかよ。
てめえらのバカ顔にはコリゴリだって学食に陣取ってたんじゃなかったのかよ。
へへへ、ここは見ての通りボンクラどもが集う貧民街でございますよ。王子はほら A 組の綺麗どころとカフェでお茶でもしてればいいじゃない。
またしずき呼びに来たのかよ。青子女子といい、飛び丸殿下といい、しずきなんかヤバいことしちゃったのか。
しずきくんは校則違反しないじゃん。ちょっとそれ以外のルール破るだけで。ってことはやっぱり築地くん青崎に振られてからそっちに走ったって本当だったのね。
he continued to give him a hard time. Soldier could not help but feel sorry for him. The class vice president, on the other hand, showed absolutely no reaction whatsoever. He glared at them with a bored look and simply raised his voice.
相変わらず無駄に元気があって結構じゃねえかてめえら。そんなに活力たぎってんなら冬季特別清掃班にだって参加できるよな。おい、今んところ自主的に申し出てるのは全校で1人しかいねえんだ。西井全員が参加すりゃ俺も青崎も肩の荷が下りるってもんなんだがよ。
The menacing growl in his voice contrasted greatly with the boys' constructed looks. The Team Canned and Team Fruit's words were doused like a fire being smothered. This was partly due to their fear of the boy, but mostly due to their fear of the special winter cleaning team. Yes, the special winter cleaning team. Joining meant spending part of your winter break cleaning up the old school building and mountainous rear courtyard that had been neglected by the previous 2 student councils. I'm getting tired, so like it's getting hard for me to read.
Wait, I've been at this for like 2 hours now just reading shit.
It was a form of legalized torture that could potentially ruin 3 whole days of your winter break. I forget about any compensation in the form of extra credits. No, it was pointless volunteer work for a student council project. It was practically a miracle that it found even a single volunteer.
いや僕らちょっと体弱いんでスミッチョで缶詰食べてますね。
私たちも貧血気味でこうやって果物食べてないと死んじゃうっていうか、冬休みはもう予定いっぱいっていうか。
All the students but one scuffled away. He's stuck with it.
よし、昼食はやっぱり静かにやらねえとな。1年坊主の教室より2年の教室の方がやかましいなんて苦情、いい加減にしやがれよ、アホども。
The mom meekly scurried away. Sojiro turned to join them, but as he did,
お前はこっちだ、宗次郎。
the hand on his shoulder held him in place.
だよ、生徒会応募。人んちのテーブルマナーまで指図してほしくねえよな。
Hinomi cursed him under his breath to his friends. Second, the vice president turned to go.
はあ？上等じゃねえか、木の実。いいぜ。お前が記念すべき2人目だ。冬休み、首を洗って待ってやがれ。
Vice President must have heard anything Hinomi said, because he gave a thumbs up before figuratively jabbing it in his eye.
はあ？何言ってんですか、あいつ。あれ自主的なイベントじゃん。いくら副会長だって強制はできないですよね。
Problem child of Class C laughed merrily.
そりゃ昨日までの話だ。会長の提案が学校側に受理されてな。本日付で生徒会役員は強制力のある推薦権をもらえたんだよ。特に会長と副会長の推薦は絶対だ。拒否した場合、学校側はともかく青崎が何するか俺には止められねえから、そのつもりでな。
それ事実上の死刑宣告じゃ。生徒会マジ応募。
Yanami's terrified shrieking continued behind them as the vice president and Sojiro left the classroom.
お前も大変だな、宗十郎。
あんたも割と暇なんだな、副会長。
Student council room. The two entered the empty student council room. Misaki High Student Council had the use of 2 rooms. One was a large office specially made for the student council. The second was an archive room, It's used as a preparatory office for math courses. As the latter of the two, the walls were lined up with densely packed shelves, making an already cramped room even more cramped. For this reason, it served more as a private refuge to the student council. The two students sat across from one another. Hobimaru Tsukichi was the son of the chairman of Misaki High School and the vice president of the school council. Like Sojiro, he was in his second year and met this transfer student a week earlier when the task of looking after him was dumped onto the student council.
副会長はやめろって。クソったれな話だが、俺は所詮会長の犬だからな。
As self-deprecating as his words were, he hardly seemed dissatisfied with the arrangement. He took a snack from his pocket and grimaced at it before taking a bite. The 100-calorie energy bar he sacrificed for efficacy, was somehow not enough to prevent him gnawing on it like a piece of jerky.
そうか。でも犬は良くないな、飛び丸。
Sojiro sat in a chair with a concerned look on his face.
あ？犬がどうしたって？
犬は良くないって言った。例えが違う気がするし、何より怖いぞ、あれ。
なんだよ。山奥育ちのくせに犬が怖いのか？
そりゃ大抵の生き物は怖いけど、犬は別格だ。徒党を組んだ野犬ほど始末に負えないものはない。足の速さも脅威だけど、何より執念深すぎる。坂だろうと追いかけてくるし、最後の一匹になるまで引かないんだぞ。
Sojiro opened his lunch as he spoke. Inside the bright green cloth, 3 beautifully made triangular rice balls.
ショックだ。
ショックって何が？
いや、そんなこの世のものとは思えない握り飯を見たのは初めてだ。
それどっちなんだ？
褒めてるんだよ、バカ。
Sojiro was always confounded by the phrasing that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Euphemisms and subtle sarcasm were often lost on him. It was on rare occasions like this one that he chose to confirm what was being said. Hobimaru had come to suspect that Sojiro had a very black and white way of seeing things.
ところで、その固まった小麦粉みたいなの、美味しいのか
Sojiro stared at the energy bar with a curious look on his face.
まずくはねえが、うまくもねえよ。まあ、試してみる分には止めねえが。人間、何事も手間暇惜しむようになっちゃおしまいだぜ。ことが三大欲求ならなおさらだ。
Hobimaru quickly finished off his bar, put another one on the table, and grabbed one of Sojiro's rice ball. Sojiro failed to notice the rudeness of the forced exchange, and gave the proffered energy bar a try.
なんだか土を食べてるみたいだ。
違いない。遊びをなくせば人生こんなもんだって見本だな。
The principal Sojiro labored over his energy bar, cringing all the while. He was both curious of the unknown and loath to leave something unfinished.
今無理に平らげる必要はねえぞ。そいつの利点は携帯食ってところだからな。素で味気ないが、食えるうちは味が落ちないのがいいところだ。まあそっちはともかく。どうだ、少しは慣れたか？
ああ、飛び丸や青崎が気を使ってくれているからね。
Hobimaru turned his eyes up to the ceiling, unable to handle Sojiro's carefree smile. as absent-minded as Sojiro might have been. His expressions were nonetheless incredibly earnest. It's like poison to someone as self-absorbed as Tobimaru.
だから青崎は来ねえんだよな。
Took a bite from the rice bowl to steer himself away from such thoughts. Now cold, the rice had managed to maintain its freshness, startling Tobimaru.
いや待て、気を使ってんのは俺だけじゃねえか。青崎なんてお前が転入した日に彼迷惑だから見張ってての一言だけだぞ。
なんでそこで君が怒るんだ？
いや、だからだな。お前が学校になれるよう陰ながら見守ってんのは俺で、青崎は生徒会室で全校生徒の弱みを集めてるだけって話だ。面倒な苦労してんのは俺だけじゃねえかって。
Tobimaru stopped himself, realizing how ridiculous he sounded. Sojiro, rightly so, knew it was nothing to get this upset over.
な、いいさ。
See you later, Ivan.
青崎に言いつけられなきゃこうなることもなかったしな。
Probably gonna end the stream soon too. I'm really tired. There's a reason. It always happens when I'm like reading constantly. I get tired fast after just long sessions of reading.
知ってるか？あいつどうして俺にこんな役させたと思う？
副会長だからだろ。
Tobimaru's handsome face went dark.
あのな、どうして副会長が転入生一人にかかりっきりにならなくちゃいけねえんだよ。いいぜ。機会があったら青崎本人に聞いてみな。あいつの本性がわかるからよ。
Snatched another bite of the rice bowl while grumbling under his breath. There it was again. Rice grains that were just dry enough to be fresh and tender in the mouth. A morsel that betrayed its humble description, which must have been delicately molded by a master chef rather than haphazardly clumped into a bowl.
そして何よりこの塩加減、中の具から染み出した厳妙な醤油加減はどうだ。食欲をそそるどころか脳を食欲だけにするような。
飛丸、思ってることが口に出てるみたいだけど。
いや、それほどのショックだったってわけだ。なあ、その字。これ具は何だ？
G. That's right, he had that nickname. Only natural to inquire about the unexpectedly delicious bite. He had been nibbling around the edges and had not yet reached its center.
ああ、それはイナゴ。
ありえねえ!
Vice President choked on his cough. He had assumed that Sojiro would prefer eating earthy ingredients instead of seafood on account of his mountain life. He never expected he would use grasshoppers.
くそ、食う前に言えよな。信じられねえぐらいうまいと思っちまったじゃねえか。
ああ、今のは嘘だよ。
Guys, for a moment.
本当は鮭。いくらなんでもイナゴはね。
おお、そうだよな。いや、安心した。いくらなんでもイナゴはねえよな。
ああ、こんな都会で身の締まったイナゴが手に入るもんか。
As curious as those words were, Tobimaru decided to let them go.
たく、どっちにしても冗談きついぜ。危うく吐き出すところだったじゃねえか。
君が青崎の悪口を言うからだ。
Sojiro closed his eyes as he continued to chew on his rice bowl. Tobimaru watched incredulously as Sojiro made no attempt to hide his disapproval.
おい、今のはさすがに聞き捨てならねえぞ。俺が青崎の悪口を言ったから意趣返しをしたと、そういうことか？
Sojiro continued chewing. The country boy's silent protest said all that needed to be said. The vice president suddenly looked like he had been struck by lightning.
なんてこった。お前まさか青崎に惚れてんのか。そうなのか。そうなんだな。おい、眠ってねえで起きろ。
Tobimaru flew out of his chair and violently shook Sojiro by the shoulders. Sojiro opened his eyes.
そうか。お前は1年前の惨劇を知らないんだな。知ってりゃ、そんなストレートな破滅願望を持つこともなかったろうに。
君の言葉には誤解が含まれてるけど、それは後にする。それより、1年前の惨劇って？
ん？
Tobimaru regained his composure and sat down after a moment's thought.
仕方ねえ。この手の噂をするのは好きじゃねえんだけどな。
Tobimaru assured himself that it was in Sojiro's best interest as a young man to know.
あれは青崎がまだ1年の頃の話だ。あの頃はみんな入学したばっかりで、青崎がどんな性格か誰も知らなかった。あいつ外見は文句なしに美人だからな。そりゃ男どもは狂気乱舞したもんさ。
Little did they know that soon after they would go crazy for an entirely different reason.
4月5月はもう上を下への大騒ぎだよ。あの時ばかりは上級生も下級生もなかったな。野郎同士の牽制、共闘、果ては決闘まで。まあよくも騒いだもんさ。青崎に近寄るだけでも大変だったんだぜ。
なんでそんなよくわからない事態になるんだ？
そりゃ青崎は一人きり、命知らずな野郎は延べ100人ほどいたからだよ。一人一人青崎とランチしても3ヶ月かかるだろ。だからまずは男同士でつまんねえ暗闘があったのさ。まあいい。わからねえならそこは飛ばそう。所詮負け犬どもの話だしな。本筋にはなりえねえ。でな、そんなどうでもいい戦いを勝ち残った奴らは列なして1年の女に言い寄ったわけだ。青崎はあれでなんていうか、相手のなけなしの誠意じゃなくてあれか、勇気、そういうのを無視できずに認めちまうやつだからな。言い寄ってくる相手を可能な限り丁寧に断ってた。が中にはそれで勘違いしちまうやつもいてよ。3年のある野郎がこれは脈ありと見て青崎に何度も言い寄ったんだよ。多分そいつ頭がおかしかったんだ。今にして思うとそうとしか思え。
Incidentally, Tobimaru decided to gloss over the fact that the student was also the former student council president.
学園ばかりか。青崎の家まで押しかけたそうでな。あまりにしつこいんで青崎も堪忍袋の尾が切れたんだろう。ちょっと口にするのははばかられる方法で振ったんだよ。
Yeah, that's not okay.
結果そいつは自分から他校に転入希望したばかりか、三崎町からも逃げ出しちまって、青崎も1ヶ月ばかり自宅謹慎を食らった。世に言う血の公会堂事件だ。詳しく知りたけりゃ本人はまずいな。新聞部にでも行け。あそこの部長は命知らずだから聞けば面白がって教えてくれる。
飛び丸、その具体的な表現を恋に避けてないか？
仕方ねえだろ。理事長の息子だろうがなんだろうが、怖いものは怖えし、高校ぐらいは無事卒業しとかねえとな。うちの女子の制服見るたびに規制を上げるトラウマなんて持ちたくねえよ。
Sojiro tilted his head over to the side in confusion. Tobimaru had lost him with that comment.
ああ、いい。それより、なんで青崎なんかがいいんだよ。
Tilted his head again, this time to the other side.
おい、お前、 本当に青崎が好きなのか？単に胸がドキドキ言ってるだけなら、それは恋じゃなくて恐怖だってオチもあるぜ。いくらその字がぼんやりでも理由ってもんがあるだろう。
He tilted his head even further. What Tomomaru was saying sounded off, but Sojiro decided not to press the matter. All the more because he found many of his own missions towards Aoko Aozaki to be incomprehensible.
そうだな、おかしい。俺はあまり彼女を知らないのにね。
It's because they had not truly spoken to each other since the day she showed him around. Every time Sojiro tried to talk to her, she immediately got up and left. As fate would have it, they ended up working together that recent Sunday, but made only idle chatter on the way back and back.
けど飛び丸、君は知らないだけなんだ。時々なんだが、誰かの視線を感じて振り返ってみると、いつ失敗するかを心配して見ている人がいる。飛び丸の言う通り、ただ廊下で俺を見かけて単に監視していただけなのかもしれない。本当は俺のことなんて気にせず素通りしたいのかもしれない。けどどんな種類であれ彼女の心配は本物だ。それにここが一番大事だと思うんだけど、実際の話、青崎のそういうところのおかげで俺は助かっていたりするんだ。
His tone was measured and sincere. Tomomaru sighed with a tinge of regret. If not for those words, he could have introduced Sojiro to a more suitable girl, with whom he could have lived out the rest of his school days in peace. He never went to such lengths for his other friends. Generally speaking, if it was of some benefit to him, he was unafraid of exploiting another. If they were of no use, he didn't bother getting involved with them. That was how Tomomaru Tsukiji operated. Sojiro happened to be the type of person who provided no benefit to Tomomaru, yet somehow sparked in him a desire to help. It was not that friendship was completely alien to him. He just didn't have many people he felt that close to. So if Sojiro had really fallen for alcohol, it was not his place as a friend to try and change his mind.
やれやれ。結局惚れてるやつには理由なんていらねえんだな。
そんなことはない。理由なら一つある。彼女を一目見たときに綺麗だなって思ったぞ。
ん
Tomomaru's shoulders slumped.
なんだ、あんだけ恥ずかしいセリフ言っといて、要は外見に惚れてますな。結局見てくれかよ、宗十郎。
綺麗なものに見とれるのはいいことじゃないのか？自分を綺麗に見せる努力をしているんだから、外見から内面を判断するのはそんなおかしな話じゃないと思う。
ん？
That sounded like sophism to Tomomaru, but he had no counterpoint to offer.
しょうがねえ。わかったよ。この話はもうやめよう。その字が誰をてめえの女にするか、俺の知ったことじゃねえし。
Now, Tomomaru was mistaken about one major point during this whole conversation. Namely that Sojiro was not head over heels in love with Aoko and hoped to go steady with her. He merely liked her as a person. Nobody could have foreseen the massive calamity that would be caused by the simple misunderstanding.
だがよ、一つだけ忠告しておくぜ、宗十郎。青崎は喧嘩をした相手だろうと別に嫌うわけじゃない。逆に言えば親切にしたって別に好かれるわけでもない。いい例が俺だ。
He spoke with a pained sigh as if opening old wounds from the past.
そうか。詳しく。
おう、昔な、あいつがあんまりに独善的だったんで、つい手を挙げかけちまったことがある。半年前の夏だ。1年もあいつと生徒会やってたもんだから、俺も女っつうより戦友って気になっててな。つい勢いで平手打ちをしようと右手を上げた。我ながら4番バッターも角也という腰のひねり。確かな実感とともに俺は勝利を確信したもんさ。
An innocent look in his eyes as his words trailed off.
翌日になってこりゃ完全に敵扱いされたなと覚悟して生徒会室に行ってみりゃ、 青崎はいつも通りだった。で、以来あいつと俺は会長と副会長で収まってる。
Sojiro sided this story. He then said with absolute confidence,
今の話を総合すると、君は単にのろけたいのか？
Clearly he had missed the point entirely.
なわけあるか！今の話のどこに甘酸っぱい要素があんだよ。俺としちゃあいつを女として見なくなった決定的な事件だったんだがね。
なんだ、違うのか？
A look of disappointment flitted across Sojiro's face. Tobimaru revised his opinion. Sojiro was something of a simpleton, but there was a quality to him that Tobimaru could not quite place.
とにかくだ。俺が言いたいのは、青崎青子の好き嫌いの基準ってのは普通じゃないってことだ。いいことをすれば好かれる、気に入らないことをすれば嫌われるってわけじゃねえんだよ。あのお姫様は。
Sojiro answered that he would keep it in mind as he looked to the clock. They had been talking for a while, and lunch was almost over.
もう君からの話はないか？
あ？初めからねえよ、そんなの。
ん？
Why had Tobimaru even here in the first place? Sojiro tilted his head in wonder, but shook it off to deal with the more pressing matters at hand.
よし。じゃあもう少し付き合ってくれ。飛び丸に聞きたいことがあったんだ。
Tobimaru sat up straight, having never seen Sojiro's face look so serious before. Sojiro set aside his rice bowl and cleared his throat.
実は昨日、こんなことがあって。
He spoke solemnly, and as carefully as possible he recounted what had occurred the night before.
しずきくんいる？
I think I'm gonna save here and call it there for today. Probably a good time to call it. I'm getting tired. Ugh, I've been at it for like solid 2.5 hours. Ah. 2, 3? About that. Yeah, about that. But yeah. I'm having fun. It's just such a long period of reading really tires me out fast. There's a lot to go. We've only finished one chapter. We're like probably just at the start of chapter 2, honestly. I don't know how long it is. But yeah, we'll continue this next week. Alright. Thanks anyone who happens to be here. I'm gonna call it here for today. We'll be back with probably Arknights on Tuesday. Yeah. Alright. So if you want to join that, feel free to.